Hello, welcome back to All for United WFC. Emma Watson is the next one on these kind of list of player profile specials that we've got coming your way. Obviously, at the time of recording this, we're expecting the announcement could be 20 minutes after we record this. It could be that tomorrow, it could be later on in the week anyway. I've got Chris Marshall with me, kind of Scotland women's football expert is the title I'm going to put on your name today. As we go into this one, we're going to be talking all about Emma Watson, what she can bring to United, attributes, best positions at time in Scotland and on the international stage as well. So firstly, Chris, welcome to the channel. Hope you are doing well.
I'm doing very well, Connor. Thanks very much for having me on and gassing up Scottish women's football. It's what I like doing most. Well, is it like what I do most? I like doing it, put it that way, something I enjoy doing.
Certainly some good talent up there that is going a little bit unnoticed. And to be fair, I watch a lot of Scotland, so I'm excited to be talking about it. Just your kind of, the question I'm going to ask everybody when it comes to these kinds of things, just your thoughts on the signing overall, because we were kind of saying a bit before we started recording this that it seems to be a deal that's been long in the making, this one, but just your overall thoughts on the deal before we dive into some specifics on it.
Yeah, as we were talking about beforehand, Emma played against Manchester United 2021 in a pre-season friendly. I think she came on for 20 minutes towards the end of the game, and I think at that time I was kind of like, I think she's going to sign for Manchester United one day, and it feels like it's now definitely trending in that direction. This season's been, I think, kind of consolidation of the season before. That last season was her breakout. She was part of a trio of young players that kind of made the breakthrough at Rangers, got their first professional contract. So Emma Watson, Kirsten McLean has just been called up for the current Scotland squad that's playing friendlies before the World Cup, and Jodie McCleary, who's the other one. But Emma's definitely been the one that's been pinpointed as kind of like the breakout of the three just now. And yes, she established herself in the team. She maybe wasn't in the team as much as I think people were expecting the season just past. But I think, as was shown in our performances against Australia and Costa Rica, she's at an exciting talent. I think probably the most exciting talent to come out of Scotland since Erin Cuthbert did, which feels like a lifetime ago, but really isn't that long because Erin's still only like 24 herself. But yeah, I think it's a talent that a lot of people are excited about in Scotland.
That Australia game was the one that immediately sprung to mind when you talk about the international. I want to come back to that in just a second, but kind of talking about her then and her kind of specifics. Obviously, her time at Scotland and obviously playing in Scotland as well. What would you kind of say her best position is? Obviously, for people who maybe haven't seen her before, where is she coming into play? And is she a bit more versatile? Can she play multiple positions? How do you kind of see it from that point of view?
I think with a lot of young players, there's still a lot of shifting sands in terms of where they fit into a jigsaw at a side. For Rangers, she kind of played in two positions. She kind of started playing a kind of attacking centre mid role, kind of 8-10, where she would be kind of one of the people that kind of helped taking the play over in the centre of the park. But she started playing more on the right-hand side towards the back end of the season underneath Malky Thompson. So she was getting used wide of a three. So the way Rangers play, the Rangers normally play a 4-3-3. Just for context, to kind of explain her position in that role, and she would normally play on the left or the right hand side of that front three, and kind of use that ability to either cut in from the left or cut in the right, depending on what side she was on. So I think there's still a little bit of debate about what her best position is. I think if you were asked most Rangers fans who had watched her this season, they would like to see her more towards the middle. But I think you saw with Scotland and with Rangers this season that she can play on that right hand side. So I always like to try and think of positions in old school Championship manager parlance. So I think AMRC, attacking mid, right centre, is kind of where I'd have her at the moment. But I think obviously moving into a club the size of Manchester United, and obviously with the way that will change her development, how things will move, it'll be interesting to see how that evolves over the next couple of seasons.
No, definitely. The reason I asked that because we've got a lot of players that are coming in that can play this kind of. Mark Skin, I think, likes his versatility among players. We've seen players playing in different positions and so on, but that midfield in particular has been pretty set in stone throughout, particularly through last season. It was the Zellum Ladd Toon kind of trio. Obviously, we've got Grace Clinton coming through as well, who can play in those positions as well, and other good youngsters that we've got on the books as well. What would you kind of say is a kind of a standout attribute then? Because that Scotland game. I want to come back to that in terms of her Scotland performances, but I could reel off a few from there alone. But what would you kind of say her best attributes are? Obviously, if we're looking at more of a forward-thinking midfielder, if you will, she's likely going to come in to challenge further down the line, maybe an Ella Toon or a Katie Zellum, whoever's playing in those positions at the time. But what would you kind of say her standout attributes are at this? Because I mean, you said it at the start, she's still really young.
Yeah, she's still only. I mean, I think that almost touches on what her standout attribute is. She's still only 17. She's not 18 yet. She's still only 17. And you wouldn't know it. It's like she has a presence on the pitch that far outstrips her years at the moment. And I think that's certainly one of the things that stands out about Emma, especially when you see her, we saw her make her Scotland debut. A lot of the time, especially in Scotland, you see a young player doing really well in the league, but when they transition to like a bigger environment, it kind of stands out a little bit. But with Emma, like you watched her play and you're like, this is a player that's been playing this level all the time. She's good with the ball at her feet, and she, like a lot of the youngsters that have come to Rangers recently, she wants to progress the ball forward. She's not going to pick her ball up with a view of turning back and looking to the defence. She will try and spin it and take it down the line. She's comfortable in past players as well, on either side. But I would say that her biggest attribute at the moment, especially given her age just now, is that she's kind of physically, she's kind of there already. I mean, she'll still get stronger and fitter and bigger, and just we all do eventually, and then it goes downhill at the other end. But I think that's definitely something that you can look at when you start to see her with other people in the Manchester United squad during training and such like. I think that'll be very clear. But yeah, comfortable on the ball, got a wee eye for goal as well. And I think it's just like she has a bit of an intangible just now. That kind of like the thing that gets people excited. Like when she gets the ball, you kind of go, oh, like I'm invested in this and want to see what's going to happen next.
It makes me feel so old when you look at like a Wikipedia, for example, or something like that, and it's like born in 2006, and I'm like, oh, my life. What do you think? It makes me feel so old when we're signing players like that, but there we are. Obviously, you mentioned a couple of the kind of Scotland standout performances. Has there been, obviously, you mentioned a debut there on the national. That's the one thing that I think really caught United fans off. So we've seen her a bit, as you said, in the pre-season games. United fans have maybe been watching a little bit of Rangers to see bits of her there. But that game in particular, the Australia one that you mentioned, that was the standout one from the off, because it was like, hang on a minute, she's 17 here playing against one of the best teams in the world. I mean, it was a good Scotland performance overall, but I mean, have you got any kind of standout? Obviously, there's only a couple to choose from, but her kind of performances on the for the national side as well, in terms of how she stepped up to that plate, because I think that's the thing that I guess has surprised fans the most, how she's taken to that role as well.
Do you know what? It's funny when she got called up for the first time for the Australian Costa Rica games. I think when she got called up, I think my expectation was she was going to play. Sometimes a young player gets called up, and they're there to get experience, to be around the squad, to get familiar with an environment. I think I just kind of expected, and maybe didn't expect it to start against Australia, but you kind of, when she did, you kind of went, aye, okay. There was players missing against Australia as well, and it kind of made sense to give her that opportunity. But I think for me, the standout was the Costa Rica game that followed it, because that was, like after the ordinary. A lot of times a young player makes a debut, whether it's at international or club level, they have that like swaggering start to their career at a club or at an international level where they really like stand out and everybody gets really excited. And then the next game they're a little bit quiet and maybe they don't do as much and people start to temper the expectations. Emma, to the contrary of that, scored 2 goals, like 2 internationals, 2 goals, and one of the goals was an absolute beaut. And I think the fact that she was able to continue that into her second international appearance, I think that's probably more exciting, because it showed that this isn't somebody who's maybe, is going to burn bright very short. It suggested this a player, and I've spoken to Emma a couple of times, I've interviewed her a couple of times, and it's like maturity beyond her years. She just has that kind of composure that sometimes you don't have speaking to people when you do interviews, especially in football. So yeah, I think the second performance against Costa Rica, and particularly the second goal he scored, it was just it was definitely a kind of a touch on the table to say, yeah, this is somebody to get our hopes up for the future.
You mentioned a kind of mentality there. That was something I was going to ask you as well, in terms of, do you think she's ready for that? Because we know, obviously, I'm going to come to whether a loan will be good or anything else in just a second, but her personality, I guess, off the pitch, you mentioned that you've interviewed her a couple of times there. Do you think she's ready for it? Because obviously we know the United fan base is pretty vocal, that she's going to get a lot more interactions on social media and all that. That's going to skyrocket overnight. The pressure United next season, if she is in and around the first team, pushing for the title, for the FA Cup, obviously we've got the Champions League qualifiers to go through as well. Do you think she's mentally there to be able to be in and around that? Not that she hasn't had that already, obviously, with Rangers going for the title and so on, but it's, for me, I don't know, you might be able to tell me differently, but I think it's a different kind of pressure because there's going to be a lot more eyes on her if she is going to be in and around the first team. Not that I don't think she's going to be starting and things like that. She's not going to have that kind of pressure. But do you think she will be able to, I guess, cope with that added... I keep saying pressure, but I don't think it is that. But do you know, I hope you know
expectation of playing for a team like Manchester United, is that maybe... I would say that if you want to talk about expectation, then playing for one of the old firm, whether it's the women's game or the men's game, pretty much sets you up for life in terms of that respect. And I think particularly in Scotland, with the way that the game has developed quite quickly over the last couple of years, Rangers and Celtic have gone from, let's be honest, mid-table, third-place teams to two teams that are putting a lot of money behind their teams. Rangers won their first title in Emma's first season. They won the League Cup last season as well. So I think she won't be overawed by the fact that she's going to be coming to Manchester United. The fact that she's coming from Rangers, maybe instead of like a Hibernian or Glasgow City. No, and absolutely no disregard to those sides because they've produced hundreds of talent, and obviously Jen Cox moved to Liverpool recently as well. But I think she's been involved in that level of expectation. I mean, the demand to win, and particularly in the old firm in Scotland, is, I would say, it's unrivaled. I mean, people obviously dispute that depending on who they support, but I wouldn't worry about her stepping into that kind of environment. And I think as she showed going into international level, she was going in with players that maybe she hadn't had a lot of interactions in the past with, the likes of Erin Cuthbert, likes of Caroline Muir, who are playing at, you know, that same level, that very top, and she just slipped in nice and seamlessly. So I would expect her to take it in her stride. I think it's how I'd view it at the moment.
I find it hard to disagree with you. I've got a lot of family in Scotland, so I think I hear a lot about about those kinds of games and things like that. Like you said, men's, women's, you know, whatever. Whenever those two teams meet, it's certainly something. You mentioned there, you know, playing for Scotland. It's got in for me that Scotland aren't at the World Cup this year, because there's so much talent in that squad that should be on the World Cup stage. But that's a whole other conversation there.
Let's not go down that path. I'm making them go to Finland. Let's just leave it at that.
Got to find another nation for this summer. But obviously, we spoke a little bit about what might be best for her going into next season. What would you, I guess, suggest? Obviously, we don't know at the time of recording this if United then tweet out that she's instantly going on loan. Obviously, that answered the question. But what would you be looking to do with her, I guess, development for her? Because I think the last thing, I don't know, as me looking at it, the last thing I'd want for her is to come into United and just sit in the reserves or the bench for a whole year and not play at all. Do you think a loan move would be good for her? Can you see her being loaned back to Scotland, or do you think there could be something else on the cards here?
I think this is probably a thing that's a lot of people are interested in, to see how she's going to fit into this Manchester United squad setup. Because I think if she was going to move back to Scotland, it would have been to Rangers. I could be proven wrong. You never know in football. But I think if that was going to be the case, then announcement would have been coordinated in such a way that was known. Do I think she's going to get ready for first team football Manchester United? Probably not. I think it's probably fair to say at the moment. It is a step up going to the WSL, especially that top end of the WSL. And as you've alluded to, the investment that's gone in it, whether players are going in and out of Manchester United this season. So how she fits in, if she gets game time, is going to be interesting. Like, does she go into the development side? And then is that a bit of a backward step? Feels like it. But at the same time, she's only 17. So the fact that she's had this fast start to her career, do you rein it in a little bit? I think it's going to be very interesting to see how whatever pitch she's had of it coming down, because she won't be coming down with a view that she's all of a sudden, as you say, going to be displacing Ella Toon. Like, that just doesn't, it won't work like that for her. I mean, who knows, it might, you never know. But I think how she slots into Manchester United, I would expect there will be some kind of adjustment period. And again, I think you can look to somebody like Erin, who, when she first went to Chelsea, didn't necessarily make it into the team at the start. And she kind of bedded herself in it, took it well. Now she's obviously one of the key players in that squad. And then if you like somebody like Jamie Lee Napier, moved into Chelsea from Hibs, her transition didn't quite work as well. She's obviously now rediscovered herself at London City. So I think there's kind of like proof of concepts that are kicking about for these young Scottish talent that have come down to the WSL and moved to sides that are at the top end of that table. So I'm sure there'll be a plan in place for how she's going to progress through that squad. And I would suspect that she wouldn't be moving down with the expectation that she wasn't going to get a first team kick next season. But it'll be interesting to see how that progresses.
No, for sure. I'd like to see her loan back out because I think if you're putting them into the development squad, even though that's her age kind of bracket, if you want to call it that, but I feel like she's probably, from what I've seen anyway, I think she's a bit too, I guess, good for that. I don't know. What I'm trying to say, I don't think she'd learn anything she doesn't already have in the development squad. I think she probably would learn a lot more if she was loaned out maybe to a championship side or a lower WSL side just to get minutes and just to see how she develops that way. A couple of kind of final questions for myself then, without putting too much pressure on her and kind of people around her, I guess, or whatever. But how high do you think her ceiling is at this moment? What kind of quality of player are we talking about here? Because there's a lot of hype and a lot of excited United fans, that's for sure, around this one. But watching her for a bit, how high do you think her ceiling is?
I think that she's got a high ceiling. I think for me, the thing with Emma is that of the talented youngsters, I think she's maybe still got a little bit technical, maybe in terms of her technical works, maybe the thing that's maybe she'll maybe start picking up a lot more moving down to Manchester United. She's very good technically already, but I think to go to that next level. But I think for me, I would say that, you know, there's no reason why you can't get carried away and say she can be the next Emma Cuthbert, Caroline. There's no reason why you can't have that expectation to go that high on it. So yeah, is that possible? Absolutely. Am I going to be backing it to try and make it happen? Absolutely. Will it happen? We'll have to wait and see.
I hope so. Obviously, as a United fan, obviously I want to see that happen. One kind of quick one that I was going to kind of round off with: is there anyone in the United squad in maybe not, like I said, maybe not next season, but going into next season, you think she can link up well with? Obviously, you mentioned a couple of players for Scotland that she's linked up well with in those games. Is there anyone you look at in the United side that you feel like, yep, she'd work really well with her on the pitch or anything like that? Or do you feel like she can just work with whoever she's put with?
I mean, I think, especially being so young, she's still malleable, so she can still adapt and shape how she plays and how she plays her game. I think the big thing for her will be learning about from players round about her and how she can take things from her game that are already, really strong, and how can she make them better to push her on to the next level. I'm sure that's part of the reason why she's made the move. It feels really early. Like, it does feel really early, the fact she is so young, she is making this move down south, but at the same time, it doesn't. You do ask the question, what else would she learn from another season at Rangers? Would she get a little bit more seasoning? Would she get more experience? Would she then really explode out of that team and out of the league? Potentially. But, if this opportunity comes up and it feels like, to touch on what we said right at the start, I feel like this has been an opportunity that's been around for a long time. Why not take it now? And she's young enough that, if something, maybe it doesn't quite work out the way it does, to see her play it down to Europe and go again. But I think if you're a Manchester United fan, yeah, I think you should be excited. You picked up one of the best young talent, I would say, in Europe, easily. I think because it's Scotland, it gets a little bit kind of lost sometimes, but I think you've seen the way she's performed in big games. I mean, she's the youngest scorer in the Champions League. She scored against Benfica in the qualifiers. She's the youngest scorer in the Women's Champions League. So she's done big stage, and she's done it for the national team, and I've got no reason to doubt that, with the right guidance and the way that she wants to progress her career, that she can be a player that you can get excited about.
It certainly is an exciting player to keep an eye on. I really hope that it works out for her, obviously from a United point of view, but also, as you mentioned, for Scotland as well. There's some real talent in that squad, so hopefully it can kick onto bigger things in the coming years as well. Chris, thank you so much for coming on. If people want to follow you or find any of your work or anything that you do, where can people find all of that?
Yeah, no worries at all. At Mersters on Twitter. I have a thread. It's there for when the inevitable implosion comes, but I don't use it at the moment. But that's probably the best place to get me.
For sure. I'll put the link in the description so it's easy for people to find on that one. Obviously, if you're new around here, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video as well. It really is appreciated. We shall see you guys in the next one.